all they had to do was do their stuff, but they didn't.
Everybody will take their seats, please. We'll get this meeting started. This is our Budget Advisory Committee meeting. Let's go around and do the roll call.
Suzanne
Tim-
France,
Tim Steele.
Eric Croft.
Felix Rivera.
Good training.
Amy Baki. Are you staying?
Okay. Al, let's get your name on there.
Al Schmidt,
Okay.
John Weddleton.
Okay. Appreciate everybody being here. First order of business is MOA financial status. Robert Harris. I saw him out there earlier.
Let me poke my head out. Anybody can find him? I can find him.
If you would, please. Been joined by Forrest Dunbar, the Vice Chair.
Forrest Dunbar.
Hi, Lance.
Mr. Chairman.
Is Robert around here and coming to join us, or are you
You got
playing
Dan.
him? Huh?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
Dan.
Robert.
I know.
I don't know what Robert's doing.
Dan? You want to talk to the MOA financial status?
Okay, on the revenues, I have some paperwork coming here in just 1 second. I was at a library training session, so maybe Lance can go first if that's okay.
I can start now.
Go ahead, Lance.
Okay, so, so on the 2017 budget, just on your agenda for an informational report, Tuesday night, you'll have our quarterly, monthly expense report, and you'll see that basically we're roughly 69% through the year, and departments on their labor budget was pretty much right on. Their non-labor is a little bit hot, but I expect that as a combination of purchasing issues as it relates to the season. The utilities are doing very good. We had the departments that you'll see that were running high in overtime were in IT, in the controller's office, and primarily most of that's related to SAP, so all of those things that you see. And as far as the travel budget, I can't remember if there's any one outstanding item on there. Just by memory, I can't recall. But if you have any questions when you get a chance to review that report, please let me know. So as it relates to the rest of 2017, right now, the projections that we are looking at is all of the departments are going to be under budget. We have a couple, probably 3 or 4 that are very close. But right now, I don't anticipate any, based on what I know right now, unless we get some surprises, any supplemental requests to end 2017. But again, we're keeping a very close eye on it. And the information that we can pull out of the SAP right now, in order to make sure that is happening, we're using the tools that we have inside SAP to make sure that those projections are as up to date as we can. If there are any surprises, I will let you know. But right now, I think we're going to be in a good spot for everyone in 2017, including police and fire. Basically, we might have one department where we have to move some money between labor and non-labor, but I think we're going to be fine. On the 18 budget, looking forward to joining you tomorrow at 1 o'clock, listen to what your proposed amendments might be, and then based on that, I'll confer with the chief of staff and the mayor to find out how, whether we have who and how many directors we might need at the assembly to answer any questions at your meeting on Tuesday night. And again, if you have any additional questions, hopefully all the questions that you've had, we've been able to address. If you have other questions or you didn't get the answer that you were looking for, please let me know. We'll do those and we'll respond as promptly as we can, because that may or may not decide on what you do for the proposed amendment. So I'm looking forward to working with you tomorrow and Tuesday night.
Got some assembly comments first?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Lance, last year, I can't remember if it was at this time or a little bit later, we had that increased expense from the fire department.
Right.
And so what changed in terms of procedures this year that allowed us to avoid that?
So the chief and I meet monthly. We started to meet monthly, my staff and his staff, and there were a couple things that he was not aware of on basically leave accrual. It wasn't fully accounting for the leave taking and how it was being accounted for. So working with him to show how he can actually track that a little bit differently, and he did it. Also, to the chief's credit, he took a different approach and a management style to actually approving leave. because approving leave was then, was basically incurring overtime. So the way in which he was managing his leave, thus manage his overtime, was able to manage his budget. So he's done a great job, him and his crew, to sort of keep a more, two things, keep a more direct role in managing their overtime or their leave requests differently, which then reduce the amount of overtime, and plus showing them how they can actually track the amount of leave and overtime they were spending. What caught him initially off guard, and Chief, and as he mentioned, he had a new team on board, the leave accrual in which it was being tracked in their budget, they weren't accounting for it all. So it looked like they were in a good spot, and they weren't. And so he's got a handle on that, and that's why I think he's in a position where he is right now, in part.
Anything else
A
for us?
lot of credit to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, John?
But I thought we adjusted their budget.
We did. We did. Remember, we had to do well, we've done two things. Recently, we did a supplemental appropriation, but that was for a settlement. That's different than, I think, what Mr. Dunbar is alluding to. The just managing their original operating budget, we did have to make an adjustment because they had spent their direct cost and they hadn't accounted for those other things that had already taken care of in the leave and the overtime. We actually had to take $1.5 million or $1.4 million and add it to their budget through a supplemental appropriation to get them to zero, and we don't have to do that this year.
Anything else, John?
No, good, thank you.
Other questions from members for Lance? Lance, yesterday we had Nancy here, we were talking to about the $500,000 the mayor's asked for.
Right.
I asked her to come up with different scenarios based on 100,000, 200, 300,000 being cut from that. So I would suggest to you guys, you look at that possibility. Not that everybody wants to cut it all, but I've just heard rumors out there. Some members want to reduce that, use it for other things. So I'd rather them not get caught unaware.
Did you guys get the response from the administration on what the planned $500,000 was to be used for and how it was going to be broken out?
Yeah.
With matching and things like that?
But
Okay.
beyond that, I
Okay.
need different levels.
We'll make that
I would
happen.
rather you guys not be caught unaware.
Okay.
So, thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Robert? You're up first on the list, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologies for not being here when you started. Financially, fiscally, the municipality of Anchorage is in good shape. We have we're paying our bills, and we have money in the bank, so those are all good things. I'll just comment briefly a little bit about SAP because it affects a lot of the back office functionality you'd expect from an enterprise resource program. We have been identifying and prioritizing pay correction fixes, so payroll is getting better. In terms of some of the other systems, the finance system, where we're doing month-end close, we were just able to finish up the September month-end close, and we have a couple of systems that have, one's rolled into production for journal entries, and we have for cash journal entries for Philo. We're expecting that to come into production fairly soon, which will help us close out the October month-end. Typically, in the old days, we would do month-end closeout sometime about the middle of the month. So we're right about, timing-wise, we're about where we would have seen the closeouts happen. But it's entirely possible that with the first time through going through a month-end closeout using the new SAP system that we're not there yet, and we may be a little while, a few weeks before we get the October month-end closeout, or it could be sooner. We have purchasing is their part of the program, seems to be working pretty well, and there are still a number of things we're working to fix there, but by and large, folks are largely able to go into the purchasing system, the SRM system, and order things and get them paid for, and we have some workarounds that we've developed that seem to work, and so happy to report that that's going well. And the last area, of course, is HCM. Still a number of things with HCM, that's the HR part that we're working on improving and fixing. So it's not a detailed report, but sort of just an overview of where things are with SAP at the moment.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Dombrowski now.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, can you give us an update on the employee pay issue? Specifically, we'll start with, because I have a second one that I'll follow up on, but start with the employees who identified that they were being underpaid. Have we made them whole at this point?
Thank you through the chair, Mr. Dombrowski. So we have, in the prioritization effort, we've tried to identify where we have payroll problems that result in a person getting no paycheck or substantially incorrect paycheck on the underneath side. So we've taken a number of steps since we went, since the first paycheck was issued on the 6th of October to when we find somebody whose pay is completely out of whack, we have processes and systems in place to get them money right away. In fact, this week we had somebody who it was reported that their paycheck was significantly off, and we took steps to get them taken care of. What I'm pleased about, though, is that the number of those defects, and perhaps this is the core of your question, the number of instances where we see that happening is rapidly dwindling down. When we have a pay correction that's submitted, and we do a prioritization on that about, does this affect one person? Does it affect 200 people? If it affects one person, is it $5 worth of impact? If it affects 300 people, is it $50 worth of impact each? We try to put some sort of analysis on in terms of where we're going to focus our efforts and resources. So, and as we do that, we put a fix into production, test it, put it into production, and then what it does, the system automatically goes back and fixes and updates. And in some cases, for the 10/20 payroll, people got their paycheck for 10/20, but they also got a pay correction for 10/6. And then again for the next pay period, and then we have a pay tomorrow. So we're expecting, we think we're closing in terms of addressing the problems we know about and working them. As I've mentioned before, the first time we do anything, we have run into speed bumps, as somewhat expected. And this paycheck that people get tomorrow has 2 speed bumps. One is daylight savings time. So if somebody worked from 2 a.m. to 2 a.m. and they got paid an hour, and they should, because 2 a.m. now became 1 a.m. And so, it's just, we have we have people who work in those firefighters, UPW, police officers who are all sort of in that boat. So that's a first. We want to make sure that the system works correctly for those folks. The second is a holiday. So this is the first holiday. So anytime we have those first, we sort of anticipate a slight bump in the number of pay corrections that we're going to receive. And so we're aware that tomorrow we may see some more come through. When we do, we'll address those by prioritizing them, by providing having our team look at what's wrong, how to fix it, and how to fix it for those individuals. One thing that this is a system that we are using, and I think just helpful for everybody to know that when I fix something, as you would expect with a large complex system, I fix this one thing. It's entirely possible that something else I hadn't thought about fixing, it got fixed too, and I didn't get fixed the way I wanted to. So we're also aware of those issues, and we register those as defects as well. The nice part is, about 2 weeks ago, we were, in terms of defect count for the entirety of the system, we were at about 210, 215 defects. We're now down to about 150. It's entirely possible that number will rise again after this next pay period. And as we do the October month-end close, we may have a few more days of defects that are discovered then. So we are working our process, trying to get to the point where it's good. So I don't know if
that covers it. I have a secondary follow-up, and it's something that's new that just recently been brought to me. I've had a couple of employees tell me their withholding was taken for their retirement. However, it was not transferred to their retirement account, so they're not earning interest on it. And they said it's happened to them more than one time now. Are you aware of this particular defect?
I am aware that with respect to the withholding that we when we calculate pay, that, a part of that is there could be potentially some withholding for people's retirement. And I believe that is a defect that we're tracking and are working to fix.
So the big concern now, I've had 2 people in the last week come to me and say, they're pulling my money out, but it has been sitting with municipality, it's not getting transferred to my retirement account, so it's not earning interest.
Okay.
And so, that is a particular one that I want to go back to them and say, okay, we probably got it. Make sure you guys know about it.
Do you want to jump in? We know about the problem and we're working.
We are working on it, and one of the problems is that the state has a new interface, okay? And we've been working with the state, sending our files, both the personnel files and the pay files. They have to now be separate and moved together. And having the state basically review them and say, yes, they're good to go, or no, you have another defect. That was one of the statements that was made this morning, is that once I get out of this meeting, that we need to contact the state and say, where are you? Because we gave them the file early Tuesday, and we have heard crickets.
Yeah, and I get concerned because the last employee that approached me said this has been multiple checks now, that their money's being withheld, but it's not being transferred to their retirement account, and so they're already talking about filing grievances. And I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard this when it comes to SAP, so I just want to make sure that, I felt like I had to make sure to say it, to make sure you guys knew, which I'm sure you did, but.
Thank you very much, yes. Thank you.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Dyson joined us. Mr. Dunbar, you're next, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is, I think, largely a follow-up to what Amy is asking about, but specifically with the IBW employees at MLMP, where we continue to hear about a variety of problems, and we received a rather long email, was that earlier this week or perhaps at the end of last week about that. So can you give us an update on that and why it seems to have been such a challenge over there?
For IBEW, well, there are 2 components to pay. The first is how time is entered and how that's captured and tracked and then sent from their timekeeping system into the SAP system. So that's, you have a time piece and a pay piece. We had some folks through an IBE contractor, NICA, that provide us with lineman workers. They had a number of issues there that we've, I think, dealt with and have worked to fix. I'm trying to jog my memory in terms of the email you were talking about from last week, but we have still been working on fixes for IBEW folks as well as APD and AFD.
It came from their shop steward,
Right, Dusty.
Dusty.
Yeah.
And I believe he even gave us a hard copy at the assembly meeting, and there was a list of continued problems with a variety of employees.
I think
Did you
we've
receive
taken
it?
care of I think we've taken care of the NICA employees. There were I think 9, of which some had turned out because they were contracted, ended, and so forth. But I think we've taken care of all the NICA employees. I know that I talked to him yesterday about a particular issue that gets resolved with tomorrow's paycheck.
Okay.
So I've crossed my fingers that we've got him, we've got the IBEW folks that Dusty was talking about taken care of.
Thank you.
Mr. Steele, sir.
Yeah. First off, Robert, let me say, attaboy. If at least you're still alive and kicking and things are happening. It's a shame. We knew early on that there were unique aspects to the enterprise activities. They had separate contracts and all kinds of things that were different. And I'm glad that you're working on those. Is there anything we can do to help you resolve those issues faster, better, more reliably, or are we just at the mercy of time and chipping away at it?
Thank you, through the chair, Mr. Steele. So I appreciate the question. I think the good part is that we have a system in place to identify when we have mistakes, to prioritize how we're going to fix those and dedicate resources to it. So we've had some discussions before about what's required between when we first went into production and at what point we get to what we would consider a stabilized, steady state operation, namely where we put information in and it comes out exactly what we're looking for. We have the reports we need to do our work and our business, payroll is done correctly, all those parts and pieces. So we're evaluating that in terms of resources we would need. We've identified some contractor resources that we honestly hadn't anticipated we were going to need through this period, and we have found ways to be able to take care of them, to be able to let them help us. I think if I were backing up just a little bit to the decisions and discussions that happened before we went into production, at the time we went into production, it was our expectation that the system was in pretty good shape. We had gone through numerous tests, and each of those test cycles had come through. We had problems in those, we fixed them, and retested them, and things had worked. So there were a number of things that led us to believe that as we went into production, we were going to be in pretty good shape. I don't think we anticipated the level of shape that we actually are in, and so we've instituted a number of programs and procedures to be able to identify problems, work to fix them. I expect as we have continued discussions amongst the administration and our operations leadership team about what we'll need, we'll be back talking with you more about particular requests perhaps for resources we might need to get us through. But right now, that's still a topic of discussion.
Employee morale is important, and it's important. Pay is probably the most significant, pay and leave, the most significant part of what they get from us, and it certainly dictates how happy they are. When they're happy, it's good for us. When they're not, that's not so good for us necessarily. So if there's something you need to be able to do it quicker, faster, better, then I'm certainly open to helping you reach those goals. So,
I appreciate that. I just would want to say as well, just to recognize the municipal employees and then the consultants who have been helping us as well, who've been working long hours, putting in tremendous amounts of work to make sure that we have an accurate payroll, that our systems are working, that people around the municipality can do their work. Just a great group of people who've been putting in enormous effort, doing excellent work, under deadlines to be able to get payroll out, for example, and to fix things. We don't want people to have problems not being able to pay their bills, and so folks have been working long hours to make sure that when we've got a mistake that's come up like that we're working to help take care of them. So I just want to recognize our employees and the consultants that are helping us right now. They're doing a great job. We very much appreciate it.
thank you. Thank you,
Mr. Dyson, we've been joined by Mr. Peterson from A&L. Mr. Dyson?
Please excuse my being late. The dog ate my schedule.
I thought maybe it was just the highway, the terrible driving conditions.
That I can handle. This data that we're supposed to get from the state, I missed what was that?
Thank you. So that was Cindy Becker, our payroll director, was and happy to let you talk about this.
Well, there's two things, right? There's your 401k file, the 457. That's a totally different interface, right? And then you have your first file, which is another. All three of those interfaces are brand new, okay? The state basically said that they were going to go to the new file structure by the time we went live. Well, come to find out, they didn't go to the new file structure. So they're kind of scrambling, because we said, look, we built this based off of your specs, and it's gonna cost us a lot more money to go back to the old specs, because we didn't build it, okay? We're in constant conversation with the state. We just need to get the file all the way through. The 401k is basically the same. It's an interface file that needs to go to our providers and then get deposited into the employees' accounts. So we have two different things going on. Okay?
Yep.
And we're working as hard as we can to get them where they need.
Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, thank you. Classic stuff in project management, the stuff you can't control, that's in somebody else's hands that so easily can torpedo it. And I suspected it was something like that. The files don't talk the same language, or they're not formatted the same way, and so it can't go across. Very unfortunate, not unexpected, and so on. Our clerk, who is going up to this mail-in ballot sort of thing, they're doing some of the things. They have the luxury of being able to do it and run trial runs ahead of time with some time. The state's election file has a bunch of inaccuracies in it, and they're going to do a trial run here, which I would have suggested, but as usual, they're ahead of me, and see with 1,000. So they're going to do that with Muni employees. Guess what? The addresses and even some of the names are not the same way in the file. You know, just not unexpected, but darn unfortunate to have those happen. So, yeah, we got to back charge the state.
Yeah, there are thoughts in my mind sometimes.
Yeah, that's,
Is that all, Mr. Dyson?
yeah.
Thank you, sir. A question for you. The assembly was overpaid. How are you going to recoup the money and when?
Stick.
Many assembly members were. So, just
I didn't give them
how and when
overtime.
you recoup the money. I want the body to know, because many of them on here found extra in their first SAP check. Mr. Roderick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the typical procedure for, in the instance where we have an overpayment, is that as a defect is, pay correction is logged, we would create a defect from that and then work the defect to fix. If it was, if it's, quite honestly, if it's $100, $200, $500, that's got slightly lower priority for me
Almost time.
than something that affects 500 people at $30 each or something. So when we get to the point where we fix it, the system will automatically go back through to the beginning of SAP time, which is the first October 6th payroll.
Correct.
And we'll go back through and we'll automatically do a pay correction. So it's entirely possible that one of your paychecks coming up would be offset by the amount that we had overpaid you. What we're doing, though, for folks where we have a significant overpayment, though, and I mean by significant, somewhere, I'll pick a number, $500. If we've overpaid somebody by $500 or more, what we want to do in those instances is to first contact the employee to have a conversation with them about how we would go back and recapture the money. Some people were overpaid an order of magnitude more than $500. They just put the money in the bank. They know they were overpaid, they're just hanging on to it. So, so in those instances, we want to make sure that as we're doing that, we're not creating a second burden on somebody by fixing our mistake that causes them to have anticipated a paycheck in the middle of December that now comes up to zero. So where we can, the system allows us to, for bigger dollar numbers, to say, okay, what payment schedule, repayment schedule will we use? It two cycles, 3, 4. We'll, we want to work with our employees to make sure that we minimize the impact of collecting that overpayment. For smaller numbers,
just let the assembly members know, okay, at a time?
Yes.
Because I don't necessarily want them all to be surprised. It wasn't that much money, but people have
It
different
can't be
points
that
of
much
mind.
money, we don't get paid that.
No, I think it's about 13 cents an hour. Or actually, I figured out one time we could work at SeaTac on what we get paid here. I think we were like $15.01 an hour. Ms. Dombrowski?
Thank you. Just to follow up on the point that I brought earlier, it was specifically 457 contributions. That's what was brought to my attention, just so you know.
Right.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the issue of fiscal year, calendar year issues. Are there any, are they being anticipated? Something in terms of a closeout of a fiscal year, a closeout of a calendar year type
yes.
operations?
Through the chair, Mr. Steele, absolutely. Anytime we do the first new thing, the first time we're doing something, so the year-end closeout and all of those parts and pieces, the 13th and 14th
It's
month.
going to be working like clockwork someday.
Like a clock,
Maybe.
yes, twice a day clock.
An old clock.
But again,
A broken clock.
the part we're going to focus in on is finding mistakes, cataloging them, prioritizing them, and working to get them done. But I fully anticipate that we'll have a number of opportunities to improve the system and get it to a stabilized, steady state operation.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. Mr. Trainee,
Mr. Chair, did you want me to say anything about revenues?
go ahead, sir.
Okay.
By the good news.
Yeah.
We have some?
So, yeah, it is good news. So the revenue picture has not changed much. It's slightly more positive than it was in the prior month. Where our projection right now for the end of this year is $3.9 million of positive revenue variance. $200,000 of that is from Fund 181. And another $700,000 of that positive variance is currently related to unrealized investment gains. But those are gains dating back into the summer months. There's a 2 to 3 month lag on the investment activity as it gets reported. So, and investments are one area that are pretty large dollar-wise that can really move a lot month to month. So, of all the revenues we have, the only one that I would say we need to really keep monitoring and be prepared for changes is investment revenue. And that's, I just can't predict where we'll end by the end of the year. But overall, it is good that we're very, very close to budget. We don't expect really any surprises. Last year, there were a lot of negatives that kept coming in one after another. This year, everything is settling up well. The one big bit of news that I think Robert shared with you last month was that the PFD came in extra strong. It was about $700,000 more than we had anticipated. And that's really good news, not just for the bottom line, but also for the police department, because most of those revenues directly benefit the police department.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Dyson?
Yeah. I don't know what the 181 fund is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And did
Yeah.
you just say PFD?
A permanent fund dividend, yeah. Yeah, we receive garnishment money every year, and we submit for that, and we came in, we try to estimate as close as we can, but based on historical patterns. But this year, our estimate was off to the good by $700,000. I think what happened is the state of Alaska probably, or it could be the IRS, but one of those two big monster agencies that usually beat us out on some of the money, I think they didn't submit as big of a file this year. I wouldn't expect that sort of windfall to reoccur next year. And Fund 181 is the building permit department area. It's autonomous.
Yeah.
Under the old system, people's office, Fund 181. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what their new fund number is, but yeah, I should have called it by its name. So.
Yeah, well, you cannot underestimate my ignorance. May I ask a further question on this?
Go ahead, Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, so as I understand it, and how long ago it was, but there's been a policy decision that most of this permitting process will be self-funding. And so whatever it charges for the permits covers the cost. So is this a surplus from fees paid?
Positive balance.
It's compared to what they budgeted for this year to bring in, it is $200,000 greater than what was budgeted. I think there is sort of a bigger multi-year issue, and I know Lance would know a lot more about it than I do, where I think that's more the question you're asking is over a cycle of probably more than 1 year, how are they doing in terms of being fully self-sufficient? And I can't answer that, I just don't have that information, but Lance might have.
If I may continue, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
So in some really good conversations I had with the building safety people, they said, as I understood it, that fees that are being charged for the building safety inspections are not covering the expense. And I suggested maybe that we ought to take whatever action we need to get that back to being self-supporting. So if you have one set of services that is not being self-supporting as we've decided we want, and another one's making more money, so you're kind of cross-subsidizing?
Well, it's actually technically no. It is its own separate fund, and it doesn't flow over to help other areas. It could be, and I think in the past, I don't know what it is currently, but in the past, I think it had a negative fund balance that it was carrying. So it always stays just within that particular area.
Okay, so the Anchorage taxpayers with their property tax are subsidizing the building because of that. I don't think think it's huge amounts of money, but,
All our costs.
pardon?
They're subsidizing all our costs.
Yeah, so it would seem to me that's something we ought to address.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilson, sir?
Following up on that, are you really gonna change the codes? I'm just starting to learn them.
It's about time then. It's about time then.
Switch it, because it's a little more
We've got
complicated.
181 down.
Okay, gotcha.
I think it's a little more complicated than what Fred is talking about. I mean, one, I think we saw somewhere, maybe in next year's budget, that said it's not keeping up and there may be policy changes needed. But the builders say that fund was $10 million over 10, 12 years ago, and that money was taken for other uses, and they want that money back. And we recently passed an ordinance that said 181 money stays in Public Works. Is that correct?
Chair, I do recall there was a Bill Starr initiated effort, and I believe that is correct. I have to pull it up and see exactly accurate, but that's my recollection too.
Is that why they're having the parties down there?
Okay, moving on. Mr. Tremangny, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are scheduling in the first week or so of December a work session and an educational session for the Budget Advisory Commission. And part of that is going to be, we're going to decide what things we're going to do for 2018 and also to train some of the new members and go through the code and so that everybody understands what all of the rules and responsibilities are. And so I think that's probably the first one that we've ever had, but I think it will provide a lot of knowledge for us, and we can do a better job of certain projects that we do undertake.
Okay,
Questions from the body for Al?
that's good.
Thank you. By the way, I did get that report the internal auditor did back in 2016, I think it was, on the exemptions. Remember you guys addressed the issue of exemptions, but the question was, do they routinely go through all of them to determine if the agencies are still qualified for an exemption? And they don't.
We are going to be taking a look very hard at the exemptions, I believe, for next year. I'm going to take a look at the state law, and we're going to take a look at the ordinance, make sure the ordinances are being followed. There was quite a number of questions about qualified nonprofits and one of the things we've done. I provided to Lance just here this last week or so a website from the IRS that you can go up and search by state and by city, and then you can see the name of the entity, whether they're still in good standing with the IRS on their exemptions or it's expired. So we're going to be working with them on that, Lance and our committee, and I think it's going to be interesting because when a nonprofit status is revoked by the IRS, then in essence they're no longer nonprofit. They can go back and get themselves reinstated, and so in fact I went through that. I think there's, I can't remember how many hundred on the, for Anchorage there's about 700 or 800. Total there's quite a number of those that have not been reinstated. So what they can do at that point is cross-check that address along with the parcel number and stuff. If they have the address, they'll have the address of the entity, and we can then go and cross-check that our tax.
Well, I read Pete Ransford's report. He said the administration, that was the sub-administration, was less than responsive in many cases because they're supposed to do an audit every year to make sure they're still compliant with the exemption and not doing that. So I may send an internal auditor to take a look at it and find out, have they improved the process since the last audit was done?
Well, we're going to be asking that question. I think they did hire an extra staff member in the assessor's office to kind of check these things, but I think it's something we have to take a look at. And at the same time, as I understand, the state tax law and the code allows for payment in lieu of taxes. And we mentioned that in our 2014 report. And I think that could be taken a look at in the future, is that payment in lieu of taxes by nonprofits that are legally exempt and in compliance for police, fire, and public works. That's something we maybe want to make a recommendation to you on, but I really can't say we will, but I know we're going to have a look at it.
Any questions for Al? Yes, sir.
Just as a comment on that payment in lieu of taxes, we do have a couple of organizations that do come before us. and
Universalist
pay
Unitarian Church
taxes.
does it every
Yeah.
year. The only one that do.
Yeah, and they get good PR out of it certainly, and so I'd like to see more of that.
Yes, Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Al, one thing I'd like the BAC to look at if you get a chance is the stormwater utility and our efforts to perhaps create one of those, because that's another case where, right now we're doing a lot of our drainage projects through these sort of catch-as-catch-can bonds and other kind of capital projects that require property taxes. But unless I'm mistaken, the stormwater utility would be billing in a way that isn't based on property taxes, but based on actual sort of usage, if you will. And so those large nonprofit properties, I believe, would be paying the stormwater utility. So if you guys would look into that and see if the stormwater utility is something you'd recommend for that and other reasons, I think that would be valuable for us.
I think in our 2014 report, we did make some recommendations on that.
Well, we have a lot. We spent several $100,000 last year to do another larger study. If you guys could go in and look and see, now that we have more information about it, just see what the BAC thinks about a stormwater utility. I think that would be useful to us.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Al. We're now down to SAP progress report. Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I switched the agenda up on you. I apologize, but I think I've kind of already walked through the SAP update.
So is it now 100% reliable?
Sure.
Okay, any questions? Anything on SAP for Mr. Harris? Mr. Peterson?
It's all done. I thought we were all through that.
Did we get the payroll problems with WWU straightened out?
Well, we've, thinking through the chair, Mr. Peterson, so we in cases of AWW, we've logged the defects and we're working them and providing corrections. And I would say that, with respect to the question of are we 100%, we are, I think the way to put it is we have a system that is in production that we're using, and as we identify problems, we have a process in place to fix those problems and to work them. Again, our goal is a stabilized, steady state program that we put in good information and we can get information out. And I think we're some months away from that. I'm sort of targeting in my own mind probably somewhere in the first quarter for that. But, we're making progress.
Mr. Steele.
On that point, are there any untapped capabilities of the SAP, the software that we ended up with that we are not utilizing that may be interesting for the future?
Cyber warfare, for example.
Cyber warfare. That's one.
Thank you. Well, through the chair, Mr. Steele. It's certainly one of the things we want to do with this new software program, once we're at the point of stabilization, is to begin looking at how we extract value from it. We've invested $81 million in it. I would like to get $81 million worth of value out of the software program.
Even 80.
Even 80 would be fine. So I think, and what we talked about before is that it's not necessarily a situation where we have changes to the employee count, but it could be that because we now have a platform that takes the place of multiple software systems that we used to use, that we may be able to save money by streamlining or upgrading or updating our processes to be able to be significantly more efficient in terms of delivery of services to the business units out there that are doing their work.
Be nice to get to that point at some point. Right now, we're just worried about getting paid next pay period. So,
Or you got overpaid.
No doubt. If I got paid anything.
It's a joke. Rose, you want to talk to us about budget? And
We
on
will all
the,
see each other tomorrow at 1 o'clock for amendments. You should receive those this afternoon for review before the work session.
We can still get amendments in?
Nope, you'll receive the amendments that have been finalized this afternoon to review before the work session on Friday.
We got a couple of ideas.
playing Texas Hold'em, it should be an interesting meeting. And we had a call from BDO, they are our auditors. They wanted a 10% increase in what they're getting, based on the fact they have to work with SAP, and unknown problems with SAP. So I negotiated down to 5%, so I've got an amendment in there for 5% increase.
How much is that,
for
Bob?
BDO.
How much is that working out?
2,500.
28,000.
So,
I would add that BDO said they may need to
they
come
may
back.
call us again,
If
depends
if
upon
SAP
how effective the information is coming from SAP.
Great savings we've had from this.
Well, SAP doesn't have a good reputation out there, apparently. Anyway, are there other questions or comments from the assembly members? Thanks for being here. This meeting's over with.